Have you ever wondered whether an old penny in your collection could be worth hundreds, thousands, or even far more? Before you overlook that worn Lincoln Wheat penny, listen carefully. Some of these historic 1-cent coins are extremely desirable, and the secret can be hidden in something as small as a date, mint mark, or unusual striking detail. Today, we're uncovering 3 Lincoln Wheat pennies that every collector should recognize. The first is certainly worth knowing, the second takes things to another level, but the final coin is the one that truly steals the spotlight. What makes these pennies so fascinating is that their value isn't determined by appearance alone. Rarity, condition, production history, errors, and collector demand can all play a major role. That's why an ordinary-looking penny shouldn't always be dismissed. Before you spend or give away an old wheat penny, search through your loose change, coin jars, family collections, inherited belongings, and those forgotten boxes sitting in storage. You never know what might be hiding among them, and don't skip the final reveal. The number one penny has a story that has captivated collectors for decades, and owning one is a dream for many serious enthusiasts. Once we reach the end, tell us which of the 3 coins surprised you most. Have you ever pulled an old or valuable wheat penny from your own collection? If rare coins, valuable pennies, and hidden treasures are your kind of discovery, subscribe to Nickel Coin PK and turn on notifications so you can join us for the next hunt. Now, let's begin with coin number 1. Imagine holding a tiny copper coin that has been sitting quietly for nearly 100 years, perhaps tucked away in an old collection, forgotten in a box, passed down through a family, or discovered among a handful of ordinary pennies. At first glance, it might look like nothing more than an old brown coin, but when you turn it over and notice the date 1926, and then look beneath the date and realize there is no mint mark, you may suddenly have a reason to look much closer. The 1926 Lincoln Wheat Penny is one of those fascinating coins that can attract the attention of collectors because its value is not determined simply by the number printed on it. Instead, collectors look at the date, the mint of origin, the condition, the color, the amount of original detail remaining, the surface quality, and whether the coin has been professionally authenticated and graded. The 1926 issue was struck at Philadelphia without a mint mark, and a substantial number were produced there, with published mintage figures of 157,088,000 pieces. That means the absence of a mint mark by itself does not automatically make every 1926 penny extremely rare. However, that is exactly where the story becomes interesting, because surviving coins can be dramatically different from one another. A heavily worn example may be worth only a modest amount, while an exceptionally preserved example with strong details and attractive original surfaces can become far more desirable. Professional grading services show just how sharply values can rise as condition improves, with the finest surviving examples occupying an entirely different part of the market from ordinary circulated pieces. So if you have a 1926 Lincoln Wheat Penny with no mint mark, don't immediately assume it is either worthless or automatically a fortune. The real question is what kind of 1926 penny you actually have, and that question begins with taking a serious look at its condition. Now let's focus on the coin itself, because every detail matters when you are trying to understand why one old penny can sell for considerably more than another coin carrying exactly the same date. The 1926 Lincoln Wheat cent was designed by Victor David Brenner, the same designer responsible for the famous Lincoln portrait on the obverse, and the 2 wheat ears surrounding the denomination on the reverse. The coin is made from a bronze composition traditionally described as 95% copper, with the remaining portion consisting of tin and zinc, and it has a diameter of about 19 millimeters and a standard weight of approximately 3.11 grams. On the front, you should see Abraham Lincoln facing right, with the date 1926 positioned below his portrait. If the coin was struck at Philadelphia, there will be no letter beneath the date because Philadelphia Lincoln cents of this era were produced without a mint mark. By contrast, a 1926 D would carry a small d for Denver, while a 1926 S would carry an S for San Francisco. This distinction is extremely important because collectors treat the different mint issues as separate coins with different levels of scarcity and different market histories. The San Francisco issue, for example, had a mintage of only 4,550,000, making it a dramatically scarcer issue than the Philadelphia coin. The Philadelphia 1926 cent, however, has its own appeal, particularly when you start moving upward through the grading scale and looking for coins with unusually strong preservation. This is why the missing mint mark should not simply be described as a defect. On this particular coin, no mint mark is exactly what you would expect from Philadelphia production. The important discovery is whether the coin has the characteristics of a high-quality survivor. Look closely at Lincoln's hair, cheek, jawline, coat, and the lettering. Then examine the wheat ears on the reverse, especially the individual lines and separation in the wheat stalks. The more original detail remains, the more interesting the coin becomes to serious collectors. When someone describes a 1926 Lincoln Wheat Penny as being in extra fine condition, the conversation becomes much more specific. Extra fine, often abbreviated XF or EF, represents a circulated coin that has experienced noticeable use but still retains a substantial amount of its original design detail. This is not the same thing as an uncirculated coin. An extra fine piece should show wear on the highest points, but the major design elements should remain clear and recognizable. On Lincoln's portrait, the hair and facial features should still have strong definition, while the reverse should retain considerable detail in the wheat ears and lettering. The surfaces should also be examined carefully, because grading is not based solely on how old the coin looks. A coin can have strong detail but still suffer from scratches, corrosion, cleaning, environmental damage, artificial coloring, or other problems that can significantly affect its marketability. Color is another important subject, and this is where many online coin descriptions can become confusing. Lincoln cents are commonly described as brown, or red depending on the remaining appearance and original copper coloration. A coin with attractive original color and strong preservation can appeal to collectors much more than a coin that has been cleaned or chemically altered to appear brighter. Professional grading companies such as NGC and PCGS separate coins into grades, and for suitable Lincoln cents, also recognize color designations such as brown, and red. NGC's published information for the 1926 Philadelphia cent illustrates how values can change considerably across the grading scale, with ordinary circulated examples occupying a relatively modest range, while high-grade mint state pieces command much more attention. So when you hear the words extra fine, remember that they describe a specific level of preservation, not a guarantee of a particular price. The coin must still be examined for authenticity, surfaces, color, strike quality, and overall eye appeal. And this brings us to the part that makes coin collecting so exciting: condition rarity. A coin can have a large original mintage and still become difficult to find in exceptional condition nearly a century later. Think about what happened to millions of these pennies after they left the United States Mint. They were spent in stores, carried in pockets, dropped onto sidewalks, stored in cash registers, exposed to moisture, rubbed against other coins, and sometimes placed into jars or drawers without any protection. Over decades, countless examples accumulated marks and wear. Many were eventually lost, discarded, cleaned, damaged, or simply circulated until their original details became faint. That is why the surviving population at very high grades can be much smaller than the original mintage suggests. The difference between an ordinary circulated 1926 cent and a superb mint state example can therefore be enormous. Current published market data illustrates this dramatic progression. One price source lists a 1926 example around the lower grades for relatively small amounts, while high mint state grades rise into substantially higher territory. PCGS auction records provide an even more striking example. A 1926 Lincoln Wheat cent graded MS68 red realized a remarkable auction price, demonstrating what can happen when an otherwise familiar date survives in an extraordinarily rare state of preservation. This is an essential lesson for anyone discovering an old penny. The date alone is only the beginning. The condition can completely change the story. Two coins that both say 1926 can look similar in a photograph, but have vastly different collector appeal once they are examined under proper lighting and magnification. If your coin is genuinely extra fine, it is an interesting collectible, but it should not automatically be described as being worth the same amount as a spectacular mint state specimen. Honest identification is much more valuable than an exaggerated claim. There's also another reason collectors pay close attention to the color and surface of old Lincoln cents. Copper changes over time, and the appearance of that copper can tell a story. A genuine old cent can develop brown coloration naturally as its surfaces react with the environment, and some coins may retain areas of reddish color depending on how they were stored and how their surfaces have aged. Collectors generally want to know whether the color is original and natural, or whether the coin has been cleaned, polished, chemically treated, or otherwise altered. This distinction can make a major difference when a coin is submitted for professional grading. A coin that looks unusually shiny because somebody polished it may actually be less desirable than a naturally toned coin with honest surfaces. The same is true of scratches and marks. A magnified examination can reveal tiny lines that are almost invisible to the naked eye, and these details can influence the grade dramatically. For a 1926 no-mint mark Lincoln Wheat penny, you should inspect the fields around Lincoln's portrait, the area behind his head, the open spaces around the lettering, and the reverse fields around the wheat ears. Pay special attention to the date because a weak or damaged date can make identification difficult. Then look at the edges and surfaces for signs of corrosion or unusual treatment. Never clean the coin simply because you think a brighter surface will make it more valuable. Cleaning can permanently damage the original surface and may reduce collector interest. Instead, handle the coin carefully by its edges, and if you believe it could be a high-grade example, consider having it evaluated by a reputable professional grading service or experienced numismatist. Published guides and auction records can help establish a market context, but an actual coin's value depends on its individual characteristics and the price a willing buyer is prepared to pay. So what does all of this mean for someone who has a 1926 Lincoln Wheat penny without a mint mark and believes the coin is extra fine? The first thing to understand is that a realistic value should be based on the actual condition of the coin, rather than a sensational headline. Current reference information for the Philadelphia issue shows that ordinary examples are generally far below the prices associated with spectacular high-grade specimens. For example, USA coin books published figures place an extremely fine example at only a few dollars, while higher grades move upward, and NGC's guide similarly shows the 1926 Philadelphia cent increasing as the grade climbs. This is important because internet videos sometimes take the highest auction result for a date and present it as though every coin carrying that date is worth the same amount. That is not how the collectible coin market works. A record-setting coin can represent an extremely unusual combination of grade, color, originality, strike, and preservation. The average 1926 cent is a completely different market proposition. If your example is genuinely extra fine, it can still be a wonderful historic coin and a worthwhile addition to a wheat cent collection, but its actual value should be determined by examining the specific coin. If, however, your coin has been incorrectly identified as extra fine and is actually an unusually high-grade mint state survivor, then the situation changes considerably. This is why professional certification can be important for potentially valuable coins. A respected grading service can authenticate the coin, assign a numerical grade, and in applicable cases provide a color designation. That certified grade gives buyers and sellers a much clearer way to compare the coin with other examples that have appeared in the marketplace. Now imagine the moment you discover that the coin in your hand is not simply another old wheat penny, but an exceptional survivor with extraordinary preservation. You place it under bright, neutral lighting and slowly rotate it. Lincoln's portrait appears sharply defined. The hair shows impressive separation. The lettering remains crisp. The fields are remarkably clean. On the reverse, the wheat ears display strong detail, the lettering is clear, and the surfaces show the kind of originality collectors hope to find. You compare the coin with professional photographs, check the date, verify that there is no mint mark beneath the date, and then begin researching certified examples. Suddenly, the story changes from an old penny sitting in a drawer to a potentially important numismatic piece. That is the magic of collecting. The value is not really hiding inside the number 1926. It is hiding in the combination of history, rarity, preservation, and collector demand. The published auction record for the 1926 Philadelphia Lincoln cent demonstrates just how extraordinary the very finest examples can become. PCGS records show a 1926 MS-68 red example selling for tens of thousands of dollars at auction in January 2025. But that result should be treated as an exceptional benchmark, not as a guaranteed price for every 1926 no-mint mark penny. If you own one, the smartest approach is to verify its authenticity, avoid cleaning it, photograph both sides clearly, compare its characteristics with reliable references, and obtain a professional opinion if the coin appears unusually well preserved. Remember, a coin's advertised asking price is not necessarily the same thing as its realized market value. Actual auction results and completed transactions are much more useful when determining what collectors have genuinely paid. That distinction can protect you from both overvaluing an ordinary coin and accidentally selling a valuable coin for far less than it deserves. Finally, if you have a 1926 Lincoln Wheat Penny with no mint mark, take a moment before putting it back into a jar or spending it. Turn it over slowly and study every part of it. Look at the date, confirm the absence of a mint mark, examine Lincoln's hair and facial details, inspect the wheat stalks, check the lettering, study the surfaces, and pay close attention to the coin's natural color. If the coin truly appears extra fine, understand that this is an interesting circulated collectible, but do not confuse extra fine with the extremely rare mint state grades that can bring dramatic auction prices. The difference between an ordinary survivor and an exceptional survivor is where the real excitement lies. The 1926 Philadelphia cent had a large original mintage, but nearly a century of circulation and storage has left collectors searching for the best preserved examples. And that is why this little wheat penny remains such an entertaining coin to investigate. It connects everyday American history with the world of grading, rarity, condition, and competitive collecting. Whether you discovered yours in an inherited collection, an old coin album, a forgotten box, or a handful of vintage cents, the best thing you can do is resist the temptation to clean it or make an instant judgment based on a dramatic online claim. Research the coin, compare it with reliable market records, and if the surfaces and details look exceptional, have it examined by a qualified professional. The most exciting discoveries in numismatics often begin with a very simple question: could this ordinary-looking old coin actually be something special? For an exceptional 1926 Lincoln Wheat Penny in extraordinary condition, the top-end story can reach a truly astonishing figure of $45,000. Next up. The 1938 Lincoln Wheat Penny without a mint mark may look like an ordinary little copper coin at first, but a closer examination can reveal details that make it a fascinating piece of American numismatic history. If you have one of these coins in extra fine condition, you already have something worth investigating rather than simply throwing it into a jar with modern change. The first thing to understand is that the absence of a mint mark on a 1938 Lincoln cent is not automatically an error. The United States Mint produced Lincoln cents at Philadelphia without a mint mark, while cents made at Denver and San Francisco carried their respective mint letters. The Philadelphia issue is therefore identified by the absence of a letter beneath the date. This particular year is interesting because millions of Lincoln cents were produced during a period when the wheat penny was still a familiar part of everyday American commerce. Imagine where this tiny coin might have traveled after leaving the mint. It could have passed through a grocery store, a gas station, a department store, a bank, or the pocket of someone living through the final years of the Great Depression. Nearly 90 years later, the coin may still be sitting quietly in an old collection, waiting for someone to recognize it. But here is where collectors become extremely careful, because the date alone does not determine the value. The condition, original surfaces, color, sharpness of detail, authenticity, and overall eye appeal all play important roles. An ordinary circulated 1938 penny and an exceptionally preserved example can have completely different values, and that difference is precisely what makes searching through old coins so fascinating. If your coin has strong details and appears to be in extra fine condition, it deserves a much closer look before anyone makes a final judgment about what it might be worth. Take a moment to study the front of the coin under good lighting, because the condition of a Lincoln Wheat penny can tell you an enormous amount about its potential collector appeal. The obverse features the familiar portrait of Abraham Lincoln facing right, with the word Liberty beside his portrait and the date 1938 below. Beneath that date is one of the most important places to inspect. If there is no letter there, you are looking at the Philadelphia issue rather than a Denver or San Francisco example. That does not mean the coin is worthless or that it is automatically rare, but it establishes which version you have. Now move your attention to Lincoln himself. On an extra fine coin, you should expect to see noticeable evidence of circulation, but considerably more detail than you would find on a heavily worn example. Look at the hair above Lincoln's ear, the lines in his hair, his cheek, jaw, and coat. The highest points should show some wear, yet the overall portrait should remain strong and clearly defined. Then turn the coin over and examine the reverse, where two wheat stalks frame the words 1 cent and United States of America. The wheat ears are particularly useful when evaluating the coin because the amount of remaining detail can help distinguish different levels of wear. A coin described as extra fine should retain a substantial amount of the original design, although the sharpness will not be comparable to an untouched mint state example. This is also where you need to become cautious about scratches, stains, corrosion, dents, and cleaning. A coin can have an attractive date and strong details, but still lose considerable collector appeal if its surfaces have been damaged. Old copper coins are especially sensitive to cleaning, and attempts to make a dark coin shiny can permanently change the surface. For that reason, never polish or scrub your 1938 wheat penny simply because you think a brighter appearance will increase its value. Collectors generally prefer original naturally aged surfaces over an artificially bright coin. The goal is not to make the penny look new. The goal is to preserve the history that has survived on the coin for almost a century. The color of a Lincoln Wheat penny can also become an important part of the conversation when collectors begin examining condition. Copper naturally changes appearance over time, and old cents may show shades ranging from reddish tones to reddish brown and deeper brown coloration. Professional grading services can assign color designations to eligible Lincoln cents, commonly distinguishing brown, and red examples. This matters because two coins with similar numerical grades can have different levels of collector demand depending on their color and originality. However, when someone describes a coin as extra fine, it is important not to confuse color with grade. Extra fine describes the amount of wear and remaining detail, while the color describes the appearance and preservation of the copper surfaces. An extra fine 1938 Philadelphia cent is therefore a circulated coin with substantial remaining detail, not an uncirculated specimen. This distinction is extremely important when discussing online values because some videos and listings combine the date, a high grade, and a dramatic auction result and then make it sound as though every coin of that date is worth the same amount. That is not how the coin market works. The highest prices usually belong to coins that combine exceptional grade, attractive color, original surfaces, strong strikes, and proven certification. An extra fine coin can certainly be collectible and potentially worth more than a common modern penny, but it should be evaluated honestly rather than compared directly with an extraordinary top-grade example. If your 1938 penny has beautiful natural copper coloration, clear lettering, strong wheat details, and clean original surfaces, those characteristics can make it more appealing to collectors. If it has been cleaned, heavily scratched, corroded, or damaged, the situation is different. This is why experienced collectors often use magnification and proper lighting when evaluating old copper coins. What appears to be a tiny mark when viewed casually can become an important grading factor when the coin is examined closely. A professional evaluation can be especially useful if your example appears unusually sharp and well preserved. One of the biggest reasons old coin values can become surprising is the difference between surviving coins and the original number produced. When a mint strikes millions of coins, that does not mean millions of examples will still exist today in the same condition. These pennies were created to circulate, not to sit safely inside protective holders for generations. They were carried in pockets, dropped onto streets, rubbed against other coins, exposed to moisture and dirt, stored in drawers, and handled by countless people. Some were lost, some were damaged, some were cleaned, and many simply disappeared from collections over the decades. As a result, the surviving population at higher grades can become much smaller than the original mintage. This is where the concept of condition rarity becomes so interesting. A date that was once produced in large quantities may still be difficult to find in extraordinary preservation. Collectors searching for high-quality Lincoln wheat cents are not merely asking whether the coin survived. They are asking how well it survived. Does Lincoln still have sharp hair detail? Are the fields relatively clean? Are the letters crisp? Does the reverse show strong wheat lines? Is the color natural? Are there distracting marks? Has the coin been cleaned or altered? These questions become increasingly important as the grade rises. This is also why an extra fine coin should not be confused with a very high-grade mint state coin. The two may share the exact same date and mint origin, but they represent very different levels of preservation. Published price guides and auction records can help establish the general market landscape, but they should always be treated as references rather than guarantees. The actual value of your specific coin depends on its individual characteristics and the market for that particular grade and appearance. A professional certification from a respected grading service can provide additional confidence by verifying authenticity and assigning a standardized grade. If your 1938 no-mint mark penny looks significantly sharper than the typical circulated examples you have seen, that is when it becomes especially worthwhile to have someone knowledgeable examine it rather than relying solely on a quick visual estimate. Now let's talk about the question almost everyone asks when they discover an old coin: how much money could it actually be worth? The honest answer is that the value of a 1938 Lincoln Wheat penny without a mint mark can vary significantly depending on its condition and other characteristics. A typical circulated example is not automatically a rare fortune simply because it is nearly 90 years old. In fact, the Philadelphia 1938 issue had a large production run, which means the absence of a mint mark should not be presented as an unusual minting error. What makes an individual coin interesting is how it compares with other surviving examples. If your penny is truly extra fine, it has enough remaining detail to be a desirable collectible. But its market value is generally going to be very different from an extremely high-grade certified specimen. This is an important point for anyone watching coin collecting videos, because sensational claims can make an ordinary old penny sound like a guaranteed jackpot. The more responsible approach is to explain why certain coins command higher prices and what evidence is needed before assigning a major value. If your coin has unusually strong details, beautiful original color, minimal surface problems, and characteristics that suggest it may be much better preserved than a typical extra fine example, then professional grading could be worth considering. A certified grade can make it much easier to compare your coin with auction records and other certified pieces. Remember too that an asking price on an online marketplace is not proof that a coin is actually worth that amount. Completed sales and documented auction results are far more meaningful because they show what buyers were actually willing to pay. So if you see a headline claiming that a 1938 wheat penny is worth an astonishing amount of money, look beyond the headline and ask what grade that particular coin received, whether it was certified, what color designation it had, whether it was an unusual variety, and whether the stated amount came from an actual completed transaction. Those details can completely change the story. Your coin may be valuable, but the only way to determine its realistic market value is to identify exactly what you have and compare it with appropriate examples. And that is what makes the 1938 Lincoln Wheat Penny such an exciting coin to investigate. It is small, inexpensive looking, and easy to overlook, yet it carries a piece of American history directly in your hand. The lack of a mint mark tells you that the coin was struck at Philadelphia, while the extra fine condition tells you that it circulated but managed to preserve a meaningful amount of its original design. The color and surface quality then provide another layer of information about how the coin survived across the decades. If you have one, don't clean it, don't polish it, don't scratch it, and don't assume its value based on a single dramatic internet listing. Instead, handle it carefully by the edges, examine both sides under good lighting, use a magnifier if available, compare the coin with reliable grading references, and consider professional authentication if the coin appears unusually well preserved. A fascinating old penny does not have to be rare in its original mintage to be worth examining, because condition can create a completely different kind of rarity. The real excitement comes from discovering whether your particular example is ordinary, above average, or an extraordinary survivor. And if a coin collector were to find a truly exceptional 1938 Lincoln Wheat Penny, with remarkable preservation, outstanding eye appeal, and the kind of condition that places it among the finest known examples, then the conversation could move into an entirely different level of the market. That is why every old wheat penny deserves at least a second look before being dismissed as just another piece of pocket change. Somewhere among old albums, inherited collections, forgotten jars, estate boxes, and family keepsakes, there may still be coins waiting to be rediscovered. The 1938 Lincoln Wheat Penny without a mint mark may not automatically make you rich, but its history, condition, and potential make it a coin worth examining carefully. And for the extraordinary example that reaches the kind of spectacular valuation collectors dream about, the final figure is $45,000. Next up, the 1947 Lincoln Wheat Penny without a mint mark is the Philadelphia issue, meaning it was struck at the Philadelphia Mint, and as was customary for Philadelphia's sense of this period, carries no letter beneath the date. That absence should not automatically be mistaken for an error or a rare minting mistake. Instead, collectors want to know what happened to this particular coin after it left the mint. Was it heavily circulated for years, or did it somehow escape most of the wear that destroyed the detail on so many other examples? Does the coin still have strong definition in Lincoln's hair, face, and coat? Are the wheat ears on the reverse clearly visible? Are the surfaces original and free from harsh cleaning? Is the color natural for an old copper cent? These questions can transform a simple date and mint identification into a fascinating numismatic investigation. The year 1947 is especially interesting because it belongs to the final decade of the classic Lincoln Wheat Cent series, a design that had already become deeply familiar to Americans after decades of circulation. Millions of people used these pennies in ordinary daily transactions, meaning the coins were exposed to years of handling, friction, dirt, moisture, and contact with other coins. Nearly 8 decades later, collectors are looking for the survivors that managed to retain unusually attractive details and surfaces. If your 1947 Philadelphia wheat penny is described as being in extra fine condition, that means it has experienced circulation but still retains a significant amount of its original design detail. That alone makes it an interesting collectible, but the real story begins when you examine exactly how much detail remains and whether the coin has the originality and eye appeal collectors look for. The first thing to do is study the coin rather than immediately search for a dramatic price online. Hold the 1947 wheat penny under a good light and examine the obverse carefully. Abraham Lincoln's portrait should face right, with liberty beside his portrait and in God we trust above. The date 1947 appears below the portrait, and directly underneath that date is where you should look for the mint mark. If there is no letter, that is consistent with a Philadelphia minted example. Now look closely at Lincoln's hair because this area can reveal how much wear the coin has experienced. On an extra fine example, the highest points of the design should show visible wear, but many of the important lines and contours should remain. The cheek, jaw, coat, and hair should still have respectable definition rather than appearing completely smooth. Turn the coin over and the reverse provides another opportunity to judge the condition. 2 wheat stalks frame the words 1 cent and United States of America, creating the famous wheat penny design that collectors recognize instantly. On an extra fine coin, much of the wheat detail should still be present, although some of the finer lines will have softened because of circulation. The lettering should remain readable and reasonably sharp, and the fields should be inspected for scratches, gouges, stains, corrosion, or other damage. This is where the difference between an attractive old coin and a damaged old coin can become very important. A coin that has survived naturally with honest wear may be considerably more appealing than one that has been aggressively cleaned to make it look brighter. Old copper is particularly sensitive to cleaning, and rubbing, polishing, abrasive materials, or chemicals can permanently alter the surface. If you think you have something valuable, resist the temptation to improve its appearance yourself. Collectors generally want to see the coin in its original state, including natural coloration and authentic surface texture. A magnifying glass can be useful because tiny scratches or signs of cleaning that are invisible from a distance can become obvious under magnification. Take your time and examine both sides from different angles. Sometimes the most important information is not immediately visible when the coin is lying flat. The color of your 1947 Lincoln Wheat Penny is another feature worth examining, particularly if the coin is described as extra fine. Copper coins naturally change appearance as they age, and a nearly 80-year-old cent may display shades of brown, reddish-brown, or traces of original reddish coloration depending on its storage history and surface preservation. Professional grading services use color designations for Lincoln cents, commonly distinguishing brown, and red examples in appropriate grades. However, color and grade are two different things. Extra fine describes the degree of circulation wear, while the color describes the appearance of the copper surfaces. A 1947 penny can therefore be extra fine and brown, extra fine with reddish-brown characteristics, or display other natural variations depending on its history. Collectors pay attention to whether the coloration appears natural because artificial brightening can actually hurt the coin rather than help it. This is an important warning for anyone who finds an old wheat penny and thinks it looks too dark. A dark copper surface is not automatically a problem. In fact, natural old coloration can be an important part of the coin's character. What matters is whether the surfaces are original and attractive for the grade. Examine the open areas around Lincoln's portrait and the reverse fields for unnatural brightness, hairline scratches, or a polished appearance. If the coin has a soft, even naturally aged look, that may be preferable to an artificially shiny surface. You should also inspect the edge and check for dents or unusual marks that might have occurred after the coin left the mint. The overall appearance should be considered together rather than focusing on one feature. Strong detail, original surfaces, attractive color, and limited distractions can make a coin much more appealing than another coin of the same date and mint that has been heavily damaged. This is one of the reasons professional grading is so important when a potentially valuable coin is involved. Grading service can authenticate the piece, evaluate its condition, and provide a standardized grade that allows collectors to compare it with other certified examples. For an ordinary circulated coin, professional grading may not always make financial sense, but if your 1947 penny looks unusually sharp, clean, and well-preserved, professional evaluation can provide valuable information. The biggest misconception surrounding old Lincoln Wheat pennies is the idea that age automatically equals extreme rarity. A coin from 1947 is certainly old enough to be historically interesting, but age alone does not determine whether it is worth a large amount of money. The Philadelphia 1947 Lincoln cent was produced in substantial numbers, so a normal circulated example is not automatically a rare treasure simply because it lacks a mint mark. This is where condition becomes incredibly important. Millions of coins can be made during a particular year, yet the number surviving in exceptional condition can be much smaller. Think about what happened to these pennies after 1947. They were not originally manufactured as collectibles. They were ordinary money designed to be spent. People carried them in pockets and purses, dropped them on floors, placed them in cash registers, and mixed them with thousands of other coins. Some were buried in soil, exposed to moisture, or stored in places where copper could react with the environment. Others were cleaned by people who thought a shiny penny would be more attractive. Every one of those events could reduce the coin's future collector appeal. Over the decades, the surviving population became divided between worn examples, damaged examples, cleaned examples, and coins that were carefully preserved. That is why collectors often become especially interested in the coins that manage to avoid the ordinary dangers of circulation. A genuinely extra fine 1947 no-mint mark penny should show the characteristics expected for that grade, but an example that has been misidentified and is actually much higher grade could have a completely different market story. This is also why you should be cautious when comparing your coin with photographs online. Lighting, camera settings, digital enhancement, and angles can make a coin appear far better than it really is. The most reliable comparison comes from certified coins, reputable auction records, and established numismatic references. If someone claims that every 1947 penny without a mint mark is worth an enormous amount, that claim should immediately be questioned. The correct question is not simply, is this a 1947 penny? But rather, what exact 1947 penny is this? What condition is it really in? And what have comparable coins actually sold for? When it comes to value, the 1947 Philadelphia Lincoln Wheat Penny can occupy a wide range depending on grade and preservation. A typical circulated example may have only modest collector value, while coins with significantly higher grades can become increasingly desirable. An extra fine example sits in the circulated portion of the grading scale, so it should not be valued in the same way as a superb mint state specimen. This distinction is essential if you are trying to determine whether your coin is worth money. The value of a collectible coin comes from a combination of factors rather than one simple formula. Rarity matters, but so does condition. Demand matters, but so does eye appeal. Certification matters, particularly when a coin is being offered at a significant price. Originality matters because collectors generally prefer surfaces that have not been harshly altered. Even small details can influence the final market value. For example, two coins that appear similar at first glance might receive different grades because one has more prominent marks in the fields, weaker detail in Lincoln's hair, or evidence of cleaning. Another coin may receive stronger attention because it has unusually attractive surfaces and color for its grade. This is why auction results are so useful. A documented completed sale tells you that a buyer actually paid a certain amount for a particular coin with a particular grade and appearance. An online listing with a huge asking price does not prove that the coin is worth that amount. If your 1947 no mint mark cent appears to be a normal extra fine coin, it is best to approach it as an interesting collectible rather than assuming it is automatically a fortune. But if you discover that the coin is dramatically sharper and better preserved than ordinary circulated examples, then it becomes worthwhile to investigate further. Have both sides examined, compare the surfaces with certified examples, and consider professional authentication if the coin appears exceptional. Do not clean it, do not polish it, and do not try to remove dark coloration. The original surface is part of the coin's history, and once it is damaged, it cannot simply be restored to its original state. So if you have a 1947 Lincoln Wheat Penny without a mint mark and the coin appears to be in extra fine condition, you may be holding a fascinating survivor from another era. But the real excitement comes from finding out exactly how well it has survived. Look beyond the date and ask yourself what the coin's surfaces are telling you. Is Lincoln's portrait clearly defined? Are the hair details still visible? Is the date crisp? Does the reverse retain strong wheat stalk detail? Are the letters clean and distinct? Does the coin have natural copper coloration? Are there scratches, corrosion spots, or signs of polishing? These details can help separate an ordinary old penny from an especially attractive example. The absence of a mint mark is consistent with Philadelphia production, so it should not automatically be presented as a rare mint error. Instead, the condition and characteristics of the individual coin are what deserve your attention. If your penny is truly extra fine, it can be a worthwhile addition to a Lincoln Wheat cent collection and a wonderful piece of American history. If its condition turns out to be much higher than expected, professional certification may reveal a very different story. That possibility is what keeps collectors searching through old albums, inherited coin boxes, estate collections, and forgotten jars. Every coin has a story, but some coins preserve that story better than others. The 1947 Lincoln Wheat Penny is a reminder that an object made for everyday commerce can eventually become a historical collectible, carrying nearly 80 years of evidence in its tiny copper surfaces. So before you dismiss your 1947 penny as ordinary pocket change, examine it carefully, protect it from cleaning and damage, and compare it with trustworthy numismatic information. You might discover that its true appeal is not just the date stamped into the metal, but the remarkable journey it has taken since the day it left the mint. And for an exceptionally preserved example that reaches the kind of extraordinary top-end valuation collectors dream about, the final figure is $45,000.